Brian's lovely to have you here, by the way, just before we start. Good afternoon and welcome to In Conversation With. We are joined here in the U today by quite an influential figure. He's delivered the most important news, both nationally and internationally, for more than 2 decades to the people of Ireland. And in case you missed him, he is still around on RTÉ Radio 1, 7 till 9 on Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
It is Mr Bryan Dobson. Bryan, thank you very much for coming in today.
Hi, how are you?
We're not too bad.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to embarrass you, Ryan, but I was saying to Greg, I just can't wait to go over and shake his hand.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I watched the news with my parents, so you were obviously on my screen every weekday 6 p.m. And yeah, it's just crazy to be sitting beside you here now. But here we are.
Yeah, we've discussed it before, where when we initially started doing our interviews now, and we're probably 20 years so in now at this stage.
15, 20 I'd say.
Yeah, and initially we were very much in awe. We were starstruck quite frequently, and I think we've got over that.
Yeah.
But today was another one of those. Today was another one of those.
Just relax. It's okay.
Deep breaths.
Chill.
But yeah, I'll start off as I traditionally do. So, what was the initial thought when you got the email from myself asking you to be on the show? Because usually you're on the other side of an interview.
Yeah, well, but actually, I've been doing a few interviews lately. I think it's because I had worked on the TV programme, the 6 o'clock news, and the 9 o'clock news before, for about 25 years, which is a terribly long time. And when I kind of left that, there was a certain amount of publicity and interest, and I did a few interviews around that time. So I've done more interviews in the last year, I suppose, maybe than I've done on all the 25 years.
I'd say you were inundated.
Well, I wouldn't say inundated, but I ended up in the Late Late Show, which was something I always said I really don't want to be on the Late Late Show, kind of, because it's my Friday evening as well. You know? But anyway, I did it because I did it partly, and I said when I went on the Late Late, I said I'm partly here just to say to people I haven't retired.
Exactly. It was a lot of the articles Dobbo signs off 6 News, and it's farewell, we'll never see him again. But you obviously still do morning Ireland with the radio, and you host any big events, like you were doing the panel for the 8th Amendment earlier in the year.
I did the amendment. I did that referendum result. Did the presidential election recently, and I'd hope if we have a general election the next while, I might get a crack at that.
Fingers crossed.
So those kind of occasions, a bit of that.
So as an interviewer yourself, I mean, obviously you've interviewed some of the biggest names in political history, any kind of history really. When you're being interviewed yourself, are you critiquing your interviewer?
No, I'm not.
No, that never goes through your head.
No, it doesn't, because your whole mindset is reversed.
Yeah.
It's what are they going to ask me? Have I got an answer to this question? How can I say something that's kind of going to be interesting? I suppose that as well, as an interviewer, which is maybe the bit of this, I'm looking for people to be interesting and give information and be engaging, and add some value. And I'm sort of thinking, I wonder, am I being a good interviewee? Am I delivering for this interview? What are they thinking?
You definitely have the experience. You've asked the questions long enough that you should be prepared to.
Yes, but it's a whole different ballgame with the other side of the microphone. Yeah. So I sit there thinking, am I being boring here? Are they? Is that their eyes glazing over? I see. They're thinking of their next question or wondering when can we wrap this up and go on and do something else. So that's the sort of stuff that goes through my head. Yeah, a bit of that.
Very good.
Well, Bryan, we'll start from the very beginning. So
very beginning.
We're going back a couple of years now, aren't we? Sandymount. So you started off in Sandymount. You went to New Park Comprehensive, and that is where you first encountered your broadcasting career, I suppose.
Yeah, I had
a small capacity.
Yeah, I had an interest in school, secondary school, in transition year.
Mm-hmm. First ever transition
year. Yeah, it was one of the. Yeah, it was a pilot program when I did it. I mean, I don't know if it was in other schools, but it certainly wasn't at all the thing. It was very new, and I did transition year. So I did as you do now. I mean, I was in Blackrock College recently. Last week they have a radio station and their transition year, and it's the media thing is a sort of part of it. And as a part of it, then we did a radio program, produced a little magazine, a paper, that kind of stuff. And that's where I got bitten by the journalism bug. Yeah, I guess.
And you did your own half-hour program. So what was that?
We did this program about the school, and I forget a lot of it, what was in it, but the one thing I do remember... What was the lunch for today and different things? Yeah, we got it, but the thing is, we got this interview with the principal, and I was the producer. I wasn't on air, as it were, and we got to interview him about, I don't know, whatever, the timetable or the school facilities or whatever, the canteen.
The big issues at the time.
Yeah, the big issues for the students.
Who rolled on the boys' bathroom wall.
And then everybody was we put this thing together. And then everybody was hauled into this kind of transition year assembly thing, and they had to listen to this program for half an hour because there was no way of transmitting it.
Course,
and there's no online. You couldn't put it online. So we sort of put it on a tape machine and went clink, clunk, and off it went. And we just sort of sit there. I don't know. They were probably bored rigid, most of them. But it was a fascinating experience. And what was fascinating about it was, here was the principal, and we were able to ask him questions.
Yeah.
And get
the exclusives,
Yeah,
And you said that you caught the journalism bug, so was it then from very early on that you imagined a career in broadcasting or journalism?
I saw it all there. Right through.
Seen the RTÉ 6-1 just flash before.
It was all there. The path was so obvious, No, I mean, I just thought I'll try and do something. I kind of got diverted along the way. I was into art as well, and for a certain period I was trying to maybe think about art college, and I was working on a portfolio and I was doing a bit of that. So, but I never thought I was really good enough for that. So I kind of came back to the journalism, which was I've been there all the time. And there was a course in journalism. There was one course in the entire country for journalism at the time in the College of Commerce in Rathmines, and I applied for that. You had to have an honour in English as part of it, and I did the honours level English, and I didn't get the honour. So that was that. All you needed was that and one other honour. That wasn't particularly, at the time, like a lot of courses, they weren't hugely, competitive in that sense to get into. So I resat the leaving with the view to and I focused more or less on English. I did a few other things as well. And I still didn't get the honour in English. Mainly, I suppose, I think my spelling is atrocious. Handwriting is pretty illegible. So I mean, I had a lot of things stacked against me. So anyway, but look, the same college had a course in communications.
I wouldn't see it as a downgrade.
Well, they didn't need an honour in English for that. For some reason,
it's still the same now.
Funnily enough, you do for communications in DCU. You need to have H4? Something like H4, which is 60% or plus in honours English.
No, I think the whole grades are a lot more demanding nowadays. So anyway, I got in for that. They actually interviewed people for that. That was the way it sort of worked, and I went into that, and it was from a lot of points of view it was better because it did TV and radio production, film production, and script writing, and all kinds of other stuff.
Based on everything, I suppose.
That is one of the biggest attractions, I think, to even communications in DCU is how broad it is, and you're touching on so many different parts of aspects of the media, whether it is TV or radio or a bit of print or like advertising, marketing, and all that. It does give you a pretty broad scale. But despite being based not too far away, RTÉ was not your first calling.
No, I started working in pirate radio.
Yeah.
I mean, RTÉ at the time, that was it. There was no other broadcaster in the country, and if you didn't have a job in there, getting in there was almost impossible. How would I get? They did recruit people, and I mean, but anyway, I went into pirate radio, which was very active at the time, and I worked in a small station initially when I was in college in a shed out in Dunleary called Southside Radio.
And was that just playing a bit of music, or was that?
No, I was a newsreader. I've done the same job.
So you're a jack of one very particular trade.
I've no great knowledge of music or anything. I was never a DJ, and I did news then, and then I went. There was a station called Radio Nova opened up around that time. This is the early 80s, and I went to them, and someone I'd worked with ended up there, and I went to her, and she said, "Yeah, we're looking for various reasons," and I ended up working full time for them, and then I was bizarrely, it's about the only time in my life it happened to me, but I was headhunted by RTÉ, or at least by an RTÉ producer.
Yeah,
that's the first now, because most of our guests from RTÉ now, it's generally been the back of a newspaper ad that they've replied to, or their parents have replied to on their behalf, and different things.
No, I got this approach from a producer on 2FM, Radio 2, whatever it was called, and I changed his name, so I lose track. And they were setting up this news service for 2FM, especially for it, and recruiting younger presenters and whatever, and would I audition? So I went in and I auditioned. I went through. It was quite a sort of full-on thing, an interview, and you had to sort of write a bullet, and you had to interview somebody. You had to do, had to put together a whole little package of stuff. And the guy who was running it said to me, he got on to me. He said, "Look, there's good news and bad news, and the good news is you got the job." And there was 4 of us, I think, he wanted to recruit. The bad news is we've no money. We can't hire you. But look, if we do get the money, the new financial year or whatever, and they did get the money, but he came back to say to me, "Well, we can't hire you, although we're going ahead with this, because you're a pirate," and there was another guy as well as pirate, that the RTÉ won't allow pirates. And that was really crushing, because that was the only deal.
Most of them have actually strange, because Ian Dempsey made his starting pirate, Joe Duffy made his starting pirate. I mean,
maybe they would have gone to established stations before.
I'm not sure. One question I did want to ask: Pirate versus when you actually did end up joining RTÉ or even BBC for that matter, equipment wise, level of professionalism, was there a stark contrast or was it very similar?
I ended up then in the BBC, and there was a big contrast, I suppose, as well. But the other thing was it was more restrictive as well. You were working, you had people who were editors, and you had a lot more, chains of command. Pirate radio
specialization,
you sort of did, you kind of made it up as we went along. I don't think we made the news up the way we approached it, But what happened was that the guy who wanted to hire me for RTÉ, a fellow called Leo Enright, who people would familiar with from his coverage of space exploration and all that sort of stuff, and he mentioned my name, to some guy from BBC in Northern Ireland, and said, this guy Bryan Dobson, you might, because they were recruiting, and they phoned me and said, would you like to come and see us? So I went up to Belfast, and I got offered a job.
What was that job?
As a reporter,
on
radio, on their radio current affair, like their equivalent of Morning Ireland or the Drive Time show, that sort of stuff. So that was great. I had a great couple of years up there.
Was it a tough decision to leave Dublin for Belfast?
No, not at all. Delighted. I mean, I was getting out of home, which was a good idea, probably.
What age were you at this time?
I was about 22.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, but I'd lived away from home briefly for a while. I got very ill with glandular fever, so my mother had to come and rescue me. I was in college.
Well, they do call glandular fever the shifting. Yeah, you do.
Apparently so.
Who was the? We won't.
But yeah, you were working for BBC Northern Ireland in a particularly probably challenging time.
Well, it was a great place. I suppose it was a great place if you were a reporter, a young reporter, inexperienced reporter.
You had a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. But it was great because it was the local radio, BBC Radio Ulster. Okay. So I was working both on the political story and the troubles and covering riots and disturbances and big political events and all that kind of stuff, and doing all the local news as well. So it was a really good mix.
An eclectic mix, yeah.
Yeah, it was a great experience. After about 6 months up there, I got this phone call one day from this guy in RTÉ, from Leo, saying, there's a vacancy, would you like to apply for it? And I, back in RTÉ, and I said, well, I thought I was a pirate, No, he said, it's okay, you've been laundered by the BBC. I didn't. I said, look, I think it was just great to get away from home, and be in a different jurisdiction. I know it was the same country, but just it was a very different kind of society, and I was enjoying it. It was a great place.
And then you went from there to RTÉ. You were a reporter with Radio 1's This Week.
That's right. I came to RTÉ to the This Week programme, to that
and
Sunday
what
show.
Was there a difference there from jumping from like the BBC and like I suppose even your guidelines or even a style guide or anything like that?
Yeah, or was it wasn't really. The big difference was that when I came to RTÉ, the Section 31 restrictions were still there, so you couldn't interview or report interviews with members of Sinn Féin and a couple of other organisations, and that didn't apply in Belfast at the time. Now something similar came in at a later stage in the north, in Britain, but that was, and I remember trying to do stories, and because I'd been working in the north for 3 years, I had a lot of good contacts there, and I would continue to do stories, but trying to do them without being able to talk to somebody like Jerry Adams. It was kind of just sort of bonkers, and
just while we mention his name, actually, is it true that Jerry Adams signed your copy of the Good Friday Agreement with an XO?
Yeah, I think that's what it looks like.
I saw the picture you posted on Twitter a while ago. I think I saw
I'll
the
leave
picture.
you to judge yourself.
And honest to God, it looks like Jerry Adams XOXO. Yeah, that's a bit mad. I mean, he's a bit mad.
I'd say he would drop you a few X's if you were texting him or that. Like,
yeah, maybe.
Have
you seen his Twitter?
Yeah,
so
like he.
I'd say it's just term of endearment. XO, yeah. I wouldn't read any more into it.
Yeah, we just had to address it because it's like obviously Good Friday Agreement, one of the most important documents in Irish history. Your copy of it, and there's a little XO there from.
I've got Jerry Adams, I got Tony Blair, I got to sign it. A lot of these were after the event.
Yeah,
because the actual copy of the agreement didn't come out until later the day it was the agreement was reached. They actually had it printed that night. We were broadcasting at 9 o'clock, so the deal was done around midday or actually it was later. It was middle of the afternoon. and they got it off to the printers. So I was about to go on air at 9 o'clock on the news, and somebody handed me a copy of the. It was actually still warm.
That's how you know, yeah.
Now that maybe was accentuated by the fact that it was a freezing night. There was snow falling or sleet, and it was. I remember putting my hands on it and feeling, oh, that's nice. I'll put it.
Yeah, just had to mention it and see was it actually, you know.
Well, you can see it. I think I put it up on Twitter, so you can make your own. But that's sort of what it looks like to me.
So Brian, when you were starting off in RTÉ and BBC, were you thrown right into the deep end? Did you have a lot of trouble adjusting to your new role, or were there people helping you out?
I was pretty well into the deep end. I don't recall any training.
Right.
But then I came to them having already been working as a reporter and as a broadcaster. So I suppose they reckoned I should be able to. I was being hired as someone who could do the job. I had on Radio Nova, we had done this daily magazine show. So I had done a lot of, I kind of had some of the skills, some of them. So I was able to kind of hit the ground running, So, but the editors would help you along, and you just get on with it.
And then, especially in RTÉ, were there any big names, big faces who you got along with early on, who helped you out, or you got along well with?
No, again, I mean, again, I don't remember actually having any formal training in RTÉ, other than at a later stage having some voice training. To learn to speak proper,
like elocution lessons.
Yeah, sort of. Okay. Yeah, for as a newscaster sort of stuff. A guy, an actor, acting coach, came in. Actually, it was very useful because he kind of focused on breathing and this kind of stuff, which I'd never thought about breathing.
Enunciation.
Well, I think my enunciation was probably reasonably okay. It was more kind of controlling breath and all that kind of stuff. So you don't get that.
Refining the South Side accent, of course.
A bit of that. But no, I mean, I worked initially with a guy called Shane Kenny, who was a terrific editor, and then later with loads of other people, But I think the thing about the journal, maybe it sounds a bit cheesy to say it, is that you learn every day really, or you should do if you're.
We always say it after our interviews. We learn something new every time. I'm not allowed to clicky pen. I had to change pen at the start of the interview.
Interfering noise.
Yeah.
But in covering, working as a reporter, and even throughout your career, was there ever one particular area that you like covering? Like I know you said, like you were a business correspondent for RT for a while. Was that a side that you liked reporting more or less so, let's say, than politics or anything like that?
I did business for it was relatively short time, for about 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe that sort of time. And I did love it. And I had no background in business. I mean, I think I got the job because the guy who was doing the job, what happened was that the guy who was doing the job hadn't had a holiday in about a year and a half because he kind of created this role, and he hadn't had a holiday, and I was sort of, because I'm a sort of nosy kind of guy, I went up and I fell into conversation with him one day, and he had all these, like nowadays we all have screens, but in those days we had computers were just coming in. But he had like 3 screens because one was the writer's feed and one was the stock market thing. And what are all these? And he was showing me. That's fascinating. That's where you get the share prices. And look at that. Okay. And just because I showed some interest, he came up. He said, look, would you be available? Would you stand in for a week? I'm trying to get away the week after next. So I kind of stood in for him. And then about a couple of months later, he left. He went off to work for a stockbrokering firm, and they'd nobody. So they kind of said, "Oh, your man, do you know what these screens are? You know how this business news thing works?" I said, "Yeah, I think so. Okay, you do it." So I ended up doing it because there was nobody else, and then I applied.
Did you have to immerse yourself and learn as much as you could in the space?
Well, actually, I had done economics in the Leaving Cert, so I had a bit of that, I suppose, and I had done a bit of business during school. But I wasn't a business head at all. I mean, I didn't. One of the first things I bought was one of those, idiots' guides. Oh. The idiots' guide.
I think they sell them downstairs in the U here.
Business for Dummies. It was called How to Read the Financial Pages. And, I got this thing, and I sort of, and I suppose just, if you're a reporter, you're used to. You don't know stuff necessarily, obviously, but you know how to find out stuff. So where do you go to find out things? Who do you talk to? Who can you trust? Who's spinning your line? I mean, it's all the same kind of journalistic reporting skills. And then I developed obviously a little bit of expertise as I did it for a few years. But it was great. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that job. So I did it. Yeah, I think I did it for 2 or 3 years, and then I got plucked for stardom.
Yes. The year was 1996, I believe.
No,
if my
earlier.
research is correct.
No, he
earlier.
did the 1 o'clock news in 91.
Yeah, I was
That's right,
specifically
that's right,
referring to the 6.
And I was kind of reluctant. Yeah, they kind of they sort of asked me, this offer came, would you like to go news anchoring, basically. Let's go in news anchoring. And it started with 1 o'clock news, you're right, yeah.
Went back to your TY days, I suppose.
Sure it was again, yeah. But, and I was kind of reluctant to do it. And I said, look, I'll do it on the basis that I do a particular program and I have an involvement in it. I'm not, because RTÉ in the past would have had newsreaders who worked in news, and still do, who work a newsreader shift. So you come in, you do a couple of radio bulletins, might do TV, you go on to something else. And I said, I'm not interested in that. If I can be involved in a program, as an interviewer, as a presenter, having editorial input, I'll do it. So they were moving in that direction anyway. So
was that your first gig in front of the camera?
No, you see, I ended up doing business news on the TV.
Marketplace,
yeah. And every night there used to be a business news slot in the 6 o'clock news.
Oh, okay.
So that's actually where I kind of got some, because before that I had never done any TV presenting. Well, I'd almost not.
Was that something you were like? I suppose it probably came with time and experience, but like you're so cool and calm and collected and composed, on that side of the camera. Was that something that was hard to adapt to, or?
You see, I started off doing it in an area that I was comfortable in. So I was there reporting business stories and financial stuff, whatever. So I wasn't thinking about presenting skills or that kind of thing. So that was a good introduction, I suppose, rather than being dropped straight in, as a news presenter. So I'm cool. Well, when stuff goes wrong, which it does, my kind of approach is it's never the presenter's fault. So why should I start getting into it?
It's funny you mentioned this one because there's a certain clip of Gavin Jennings when you first, I think it was your first week on Morning Ireland, where he got a name wrong.
He was fed the wrong name or something like that.
Yeah,
and there was what someone described a death stare from yourself to somebody off camera.
There was arms in the air like
but
this.
That wasn't me. That was
Gavin had the arms in the air. There's just a hint of a look going off camera.
He forgot that he was on camera.
Yeah, that's the thing about the RTÉ Radio 1. How they record you as you're doing the radio.
Yeah.
Do you find that annoying, or?
Well, you see, for me, no, because I'm used to it. Once I'm, when I'm on air, my instinct is that there's a camera somewhere, and I think for some of the others, it's a new experience. So they've been kind of learning to adapt to it. So we have to just be, because we used to have. I mean, in radio, when I worked in radio before, you'd have all kinds of gestures you'd make. One of which was when an interview was going on too long.
Yeah.
You can't really do that kind of stuff any longer. But then friends of mine start texting me saying, stop biting your nails, or you're yawning, or something like that. So
harsh enough. But so like we said, you started on the 1 o'clock, and then obviously you went on to do 6 and 9 respectively. 9
o'clock then, and
was there, out of the 3, which did you prefer in terms of maybe convenience, or just how was your schedule with each 3 and things?
Well, the schedule was like the 9 o'clock news. I was working at 9 o'clock every night, which actually it was my wife only recently was saying it was a bit of a nightmare for her, because the children were quite small, and I didn't. You've always, if you work in journalism, you work odd hours. It kind of comes.
What would be your hours? So if you were doing the 9 o'clock, like 6 to.
I'd be in early afternoon. I used to. There was an editorial meeting at 2 o'clock. I might be at that, because you need to be sort of thinking ahead. Maybe a bit later if it's a quietish day, So, and then you knock off. Great thing, of course, about daily journalism is once it's over, it's over.
Yeah.
So you're not bringing work home, or occasionally, you might have to prepare for something, but you just walk away from it, and the next day is a blank sheet, But in terms of the programs, I think the 6-1 was the one that was most satisfying. I mean, leaving aside the hours or whatever, that because it was a longer program, it would
larger
cover
viewership, more so.
No, well, actually, no, not a larger viewership. Would have a bigger share of the available viewership. So, but the 9 o'clock would have certainly had in the past a bigger actual number of people watching, because there's more people watching TV at 9. This was the 6. But the 6 o'clock news would do more breaking news and more stuff happening, and because it's an hour-long show, we would do interviews. So that's a bit more challenging. 9 o'clock news was more news presenting, less that kind of stuff.
And like you say, you did the 6-1 for just over the best part of
21 years.
21 years. Yeah.
I read afterwards that you didn't actually realise.
No, I didn't. I was hard pressed.
Come on, Brian.
Well, I could, if you'd actually said to me, how long have you doing it? But I wouldn't. I'd have to think. Well, I remember when such and such an event happened. I was doing that, and then by the time this thing happened, for example, by the time the Good Friday Agreement came, I was on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
So that's 1998.
Yeah.
So I knew I was doing it for 20 years, or 19 years at that stage.
Yeah.
So I couldn't put my finger on exactly when. So somebody went off and looked up in the files.
So working as even just a news anchor for probably 25 or so.
Yeah.
What are some of the most memorable stories that you've covered? What ones stick out? I mean, there's probably the big historic ones that you can name.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of it's no surprise. 9/11, Good Friday Agreement. I did other stuff. I was in South Africa when Nelson Mandela got elected just a long time ago now. That was a great story.
I seen some of the reel of that there yesterday when I was doing my research.
Yeah.
You're a bit younger in it, Brian.
I was very young. I was 33. Yeah.
But even when a story like 9/11 breaks, when the news comes down the line, is in the newsroom, is it all hands on deck, panic stations when that kind of news comes through?
Well, hopefully it's not panic stations, but it's certainly all hands on deck. Yeah, when that happened. Actually, I was in Dublin. I was in Dublin city centre, and of course it was before the mobile phones and that kind of stuff. So I met somebody in the street who said something's happened. The plane has run into the World Trade Center, and I was actually I was heading round to government buildings where I was due to interview a man called Richard Haas, who was President Bush's his envoy to Ireland, and he was meeting I think Bertie was Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern, and I was due to do an interview with him at government buildings, and I got round and there was this press conference, and of course it was all about and the interview was cancelled. I headed straight back out to RTÉ, and they'd already on air, but I went into studio and we were on the air for whatever it was, 3 through till 10 o'clock that night or whatever. So
very good.
It's I imagine it had to be a very difficult one, like in terms of how you deliver it. Like, was that sitting in the back of your head? Because I actually seen in the highlight reel as well, like you are visibly emotional. Your eyes are quite glossy, and it must be hard. Like,
I don't remember it being hard. I mean, it's obviously emotional, and I think it's important as a presenter that you reflect some of that as well. But obviously, you don't try not to lose it. I think what I do on these sort of stories is I try to hang on to the facts. What can we say here that we know about what's happened? And on a program like that, which is rolling through a number of hours, you're obviously repeating yourself and then adding some new facts. The people outside in the gallery are trying to get somebody on the end of a phone line, and I mean, it was Conor O'Cleary, I remember very clearly from that, who was the Irish Times correspondent and had an apartment in one of the buildings down in that area, and he was on the line describing people jumping out of the windows, to try and get away from the flames before the whole thing. The buildings just came down. So
I can't imagine now, like, being in the newsroom and you were obviously out and about, and that news coming in, like how you're going to report it, or how you're going to not give. I suppose
processing it firstly,
and give justice to just the magnitude of what's actually happened. It's a national or international, like global, disastrous event that's happened, and like it's on your shoulders to deliver that news to certainly your own nation, if not further afield broadcast as well.
I think you feel a responsibility to do that, but. Like I say, a lot of the time you're just trying to get material. Can we get some pictures? And there were early on there was a dearth of pictures. So we were just rerunning the shots that are famous now. And one of the other images that I remember was the line of ambulances which had been put on standby, and there was nobody being brought to them because there were no injured.
It's fair to say over your time anchoring and just news reporting in general, you've had a good few interviews. We talked about being an interviewee versus interviewer and stuff like that. Who sticks out in the memory for better or for worse as interviewees go?
There's just so many of them. In terms of big names, I suppose I interviewed Clinton actually twice, but after he was president. He didn't do a whole lot of interviews when he was president because there was a Monica Lewinsky issue and that kind of stuff. So but anyway, afterwards I met him twice and interviewed him, and that was a great experience. And he's very impressive.
He was actually here there earlier in the year, getting an honorary doctorate from the college.
Yeah. I was here for that. Yeah, and Hillary as well. Actually, Hillary Clinton. So but a lot of it is just here's the Minister for Finance to talk about the budget, or
asking, that's it. Really. You have questions, you go through them, and
it's kind of the meat and drink of what we do.
And you have said if you were to pick your interviews, you wouldn't be picking a politician to interview, anyways.
If I was picking my ideal, probably. I mean, one of the fun things about Morning Ireland is I now get to do, as all the presenters do, interviews of people in the arts. People involved, not so much sport, because there's a sports team who deal that kind of stuff. So, but I get kind of out a little bit away from the politics.
It's probably a bit more diverse than.
Yeah, I read Donal Ryan on the other morning, who's the one of the nominees for the Booker Prize, isn't it? Or the Costa, sorry. And it was great fun. I mean, I did that sort of stuff. I read loads of history, so if there's anything kind of historical, so all this decade of commemorations. I love that stuff.
Anyway, Brian, you're saying you're a big history buff. I have to ask, have you bought David McCullough's Devil Hour books?
I have.
Yeah. Did you actually buy them, or did a publisher send them out to you, or did David give you?
No, I actually bought them.
Okay.
I bought them, and I bought the first one at the book launch.
So you were obliged to kind of buy it. So yeah.
Well, no, I wanted to.
Greg has this knack of trying to he tries to spark beef with RTÉ personalities between themselves.
Oh, a row, is it?
Yeah.
See,
well, I tell you what he did. He had this launch in the National Library. It was a great occasion. Great, and Leo Varadkar did the kind of honours. It was great. So anyway, I bought the book, and he wrote in it. It was a year ago, so I was just starting on Morning Ireland, and he wrote, to Brian, hope this will help you get to sleep.
That's very David McCullough humour.
Yeah, I mean, he was saying
we interviewed him the day after
the launch of
the second
one. I bought the second one, and but I haven't started it yet. I read the first one, and I just thought it was great. It's really well written. It's written by a journalist, so he's got that eye for.
But it took him. He did his research. What did he say? His research was 5 years and then 2 years to write it or something. Yeah, 7 in total.
But he's he was saying it functioned very well as a doorstop, or if your table is missing a bit under the leg, you can put it under the table.
Did you hear the story about the publishers? Did you tell you?
No.
Well, apparently.
How much he wrote?
Yeah.
And
he presented them, and they said you didn't have to do the 2 parts in one. So it's just part 1. So there's a bit of editing to be done.
I'm sure he'll be glad to hear that you're
supporting,
a fan of his books. Yeah.
I'd love to have been a historian. I just think and I think it's something about being a journalist and trying to make sense of things that are happening, and actually a lot of the time failing, I think. And you look back at historic events, and there's a clarity about things. You can say, we know this happened. Now, of course, the other thing is that historical interpretations change, which also is an interesting insight into actually where you come, the perspective you have on something. I just find it interesting. It's a lovely contrast to the kind of fog.
I have a nice quote about this.
Contemporary world.
Journalism is the first draft of history.
That's a well-known phrase, which I'm not sure I agree with.
Just because I'm starting beef between you and David, doesn't mean you have to throw it at me, Ryan, okay?
I don't think that's true, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it is a phrase. It is a phrase that's used a lot. Yeah, but I think it's way before the first draft of history. I think it's much earlier. It's much too much immersed in the immediate events.
Yeah, I suppose.
And you probably can't write history anyway until the events are at least 20 years ago or whatever.
Well, it must be strange for yourself, because as you're presenting the news, it is your job to present it, get it out of the way, and you don't get to really reflect on it as much, I would presume.
No.
So would you look back on recent periods in history, read back on them now, and would it change perspective?
Well, I've got to the stage now where actually I can start reading about events that are beginning to be written about as history that I covered. That's really very unsettling. Yeah. Good Friday would be a case in point. There's material coming out now a bit about that. We haven't quite got to the stage where confidential documents, are being released and all that kind of thing. But people are publishing memoirs of the period. A fellow called Jonathan Powell, who wrote a very good account, A Great Hatred, Little Room. I think he was Tony Blair's advisor on Northern Ireland, so he was the guy who did a lot of the meetings and
be in a good position to.
And he wrote a fantastic account of it. And I remember reading that. It's a couple of years old now at this stage, and thinking how little we knew about what was actually going on.
And is there any particular period in history that fascinates you most?
Well, modern Irish history, I suppose, because we live with the effects of it, here in the here and now,
And then just even as you were a presenter during the recession, how do you reflect back on that period when? I think we were talking to Eileen Dunn, and she was saying every day there'd be something new. You'd have, and it'd be chaos in the newsroom because you wouldn't know what was going to come out, and it could be last minute. So how do you reflect on that period of just chaos and uncertainty?
Oh, certainly that. Yeah, a lot of uncertainty, obviously. Yeah, and it was a story that affected everybody.
Yeah, everyone.
All of us who were reporting the story. A lot of the times, as journalists, you're reporting events that they're not, thank goodness, going to affect you. But that was something that we knew was going to affect all our lives, and our children, and our families, and our neighbours, and our friends, and all the rest of it. So we were completely immersed in the story, as in terms of being impacting on us. And how do I look back? Well, I think as well that really got hard to make sense of. How do you interrogate? There was going to be what did late Brian Lennon say was the best banking. The best value bank bailout or whatever in history, and how do you judge that? And how do you, as a reporter, how do you bring a kind of critical faculty to bear on something that is literally unprecedented?
Yeah. Would you consider being a newscaster a stressful job, Brian?
No.
Not stressful?
No, I don't. Now maybe that's just because I have the whatever.
Yeah.
Do you just see yourself as like the whole kind of like the messenger, don't shoot the messenger kind of thing? You're the middleman between the news.
That might be oversimplifying it slightly, but I
saw a survey recently which intrigued me that journalists are well down in terms of public trust. One of these things. Who do you trust? And I don't know who's up the top, doctors and nurses and whatever. And journalists are sort of. They're definitely in the lower half and probably the bottom end of the lower half, but newsreaders are actually around the middle. They're higher. They're trust in newsreaders is quite a bit higher than journalists.
With journalists,
which is bizarre because
you can consider online journalism within that. And you do have to take everything you see online nearly with a pinch of salt. Whereas a newsreader, it's still a kind of tradition. Like they're on your telly. They're getting the facts straight from
it's coming from RTÉ, so
exactly.
It's national broadcast.
Yeah, in that sense, that actually makes a little bit of sense.
Brian, what's your publication of choice or outlet? Like your morning newspaper, what would you pick up now?
Well, you see, I kind of read them all.
Okay.
And I have always looked well. Sort of the Irish, the ones that are, and then the British. Well, I mean, at the moment, I go first maybe to the Telegraph. Because I want to see what they're saying about Brexit, and I want to get that perspective, because we don't get it here really, and so I would read the Spectator, which is another sort of full-on Brexit public, not every week, but from time to time, just to sort of dip into it. So those are the kind of ones I go to. I keep saying I should get into some of the American publications, get into that, but I just have never really kind of gone into them. I kind of look at some of the websites and follow a bit of the coverage in the States, but not a whole lot.
Okay. Yeah. And do you still buy physical newspapers, or do you do everything online?
Very occasionally.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I have the luxury now. I come into work and they're all there.
Yeah,
so, I don't have to buy.
Oh, we actually seen. Remember when we were over in the TV centre the last time? I forget who it was. There was the big stacks outside the door.
Yeah. Newspapers.
Yeah. So you get the papers. So those days when I'm off, I go online. Yeah, sure. I mean, I have a subscription there to very Irish Times, whatever. The Indo. So
we get a free Irish Times subscription with the.
We do because we're
third level. Yeah. Do you not use it?
I'm gonna do it. Right?
You should.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm gonna go on subscription. Absolutely.
I still like a paper though. I still like to open a paper, particularly the weekend.
I do find it easy. Yeah, certainly. Like when we do readings and stuff like that, like our readings will be up online for us to read, and we can read a PDF of it or whatever. But it's certainly easier to read the physical paper than it is.
You also there's a thing you get in the paper which is stories are positioned in particular just on the inside three or whatever. There's different headlines. You don't so you kind of get a sense of what the paper thinks is important. And then you go looking for the things that they just bury, what are they? And you have that sense of, a sort of stacking of priorities. You don't get that from the online thing. You're scrolling down along through.
It's kind of as recent as it comes, like I suppose chronological kind of. Yeah.
But it's where it's going. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be printed papers in 10 or 15 years.
Did you ever see us getting to this point? Like, did you ever envisage it?
Not until recently. Okay. I mean, this is a change that's coming. 10 years? Is it 15 years at most?
iPhone was 11 years ago.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the big change. It's the big technological change, obviously, and then social media has had a huge impact in terms of people's trust or lack of trust in mainstream media, if I can use that phrase, which I think is the big issue for journalism.
You're on Twitter yourself?
Yeah, but not active.
You're
occasionally.
6 days ago we checked it.
50,000 followers.
Yeah, that's a good following.
We will be getting on to you about that in post production.
Do you have any other social media accounts?
No. No.
Yeah, did you ever dabble in Facebook during its prime?
I had Facebook, yeah, and I think I just left it when all that sort of stuff about the Analytica came. I don't want to be. I don't want to
like
put my profile up there.
Twitter, I think you had a very similar approach to David, who we mentioned, David McCullough, where he says like it's a necessary tool for the likes of promotion and things like that, and maybe the odd bit of fun, but other than that he wouldn't use social media, wouldn't engage in it. He doesn't have time for it.
No, I don't. You know, you see people who are very active in terms of engaging, as in replying to people and getting involved in online discussion, all that kind of stuff. I don't do that.
David did reply to we recently uploaded our episode with...
We should have showed him that and said,
we recently uploaded our interview with Eileen Dunn, who I'm sure of course you're familiar with, and
we might actually just do it for the
a little tidbit that we got at the end of Eileen Dunn's interview. So we interviewed Eileen and David in the same day, and once we were finished with Eileen, we were like, Eileen, is there any is there any bits that you can give us about David that we can show to him in our next interview? And she came up with a rather good one, so Greg is going to find
it's okay, you only have to listen.
That's the first one in the books anyways. Lovely. Lads will be happy with the award. Yeah. Sure, look, we actually do have a second interview coming up now today as well with David McCullough. Oh, very good. Anything, any little information for us? Give us a...
I slept with him once.
Yeah. Just for context, you should probably listen to the end.
We're still not recording.
That's well, his wife used to joke that we slept together once. We slept beside each other outside for focus, you know.
Right, okay.
And we uploaded that short clip onto our social media platforms, including Twitter, and I mentioned David in the tweet, and he replied to us just saying
See, I read it like that as well.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're late November 2018, so it's been about 13 months or so since you made the big decision, the apocalyptic decision for most people on social media.
Was it a decision, or were you maybe told? Were you told, Brian, time's come?
No. Well, what actually happened is that. Well, I mean, the context was I was looking for a kind of an exit. I wanted to do something else, because it was just a long time I've been doing this.
Imagine, like,
you know, it's hard. And I tell you what I was afraid of. I was afraid of that I'd start to get bored.
Okay.
And that it would become obvious, because actually I don't think you can disguise that.
Yeah.
You know, that I'd lose interest. And in fact, a friend of mine who I've known for a long, long time, and who I worked with in Pirate Radio, and we were chatting. He said, you know, sometimes I see, Brian, you look a bit like you're on automatic pilot. And I mean, I said, I don't want to now. I hope you don't take offence. No, I don't. And you know, you're right. I've got to a stage where it's time to move on. This is after I'd announced I was moving on. So that was kind of in the background. And but what happened was that my predecessor, Colin McCullough, had retired. And so there was a vacancy. Now, it never occurred to me that to look for this. Mm-hmm. And then I was having a chat with my boss, one of those, you know, how are things, you're getting on, everything all right, any issues, you know, the usual, sort of just a general chat. And she said, would you, and I was saying, well, you know, I do find that sometimes I feel I'm doing this too long, you know. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, we were looking for somebody for more than, would you like to do 1 day a week kind of thing? Really, that was her suggestion, just to have a bit of variety. I thought, I would actually be interested in that. And I went home and I said this to my wife, and she said, why would you only do it 1 day a week? She said, is there a vacancy? I said, there is. Well, why didn't you ask them if they'll give it to you? If, you know, you can have the gig. So that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? And I went back into them, and they said, yeah. They agreed reasonably quickly. So maybe
that's saying something.
I mean, as CVs go,
I'd say you were probably qualified.
It's safe to say that yours was probably good enough for them.
Yeah.
So so I was delighted. Yeah. So before I knew where I was there, that was it. You know, it was all hush hush at the beginning, and then of course because it's a newsroom, it got out.
Who's the biggest gossip in the newsroom?
Who's the biggest gossip?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We heard Des Cahill is an awful gossip.
Marty. Well, I know Marty might not be in the newsroom as often, but we've heard he's an awful gossip around RTÉ.
Not on Morning Ireland. People on Morning Ireland don't go because we're not there. You know, we're kind of there when people are, you know, still in their beds, so we don't get that that much. Who would be? Who'd be a good gossip in RTÉ? My former co-presenter Sharni would always have a few little tidbits. To share. Yeah, definitely. You know, I wouldn't now describe it as a gossip. I'd say well informed.
Which, as you know, as a newsreader, is quite an important trait, I'd say.
And that brings us to it. Bryan, what would you say is most important qualities for someone coming into the media industry now?
Oh, coming into the media industry.
Yeah, see, I decided to say media industry as opposed to a defined role, because I think that's the way it's moving.
Well, I suppose it depends on the role.
Yeah.
Now, there is an element in, I think you need to be increasingly a bit of a jack of all trades. You know, to be able to turn social media, desktop publishing, you know, blogging, you know, whatever, all of the gamut of it. Yeah, so... I mean, I think the qualities for a journalist are the same as they've always been, which is, you know, curiosity, nosy, inquisitive, you know, skeptical, interested in things, and if you're not actually, going to be the capacity to make yourself interested as well. And you can do that, you know. So I mean, sometimes you find yourself doing a certain thing. Well, what's that? But actually, if you search for the little thing that excites you, and then it's going to excite your interest. Hopefully it excites the interest of whoever you're trying to broadcast through to or write for. So and like perseverance in terms of your career, because you have to keep pushing, and perseverance in terms of getting stories. You know, the first phone call, oh no, we're not doing that. You come back again. You know, I mean, it's always fascinating to watch one of my colleagues trying to persuade somebody to do an interview. Oh no, it'll be fine. No, actually, no. I've been talking to you. No, you'll be brilliant. You'll be fantastic. No, we'll send a taxi.
It actually, when you said about the distrust amongst journalists and stuff, I work as a freelance reporter with a local newspaper, and I was doing some pre-county final, football final interviews. And one of the managers I got on to, I said, just, hi, Greg Hall, with whatever, and he's grand, yeah, go on, we'll give you 10 minutes. And I said, perfect, cheers. And he says, now, just before we get started, so you know, this is going to be a game of cat and mouse. And he said, we're going to play the game, so play with me. So
off you go.
Yeah,
and
that was, if there was anything he didn't like, no. Everything he thought about was very thought about, it was very planned, very strategic. He didn't want to give anything away, and that's what people are looking for. I've noticed with the interviews I've done, they're looking for you to catch, to trip them up, to get that
little spark.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the kind of the holy grail of an interview is to get somebody actually thinking on their feet.
Yeah. It's not rehearsed.
Rather than going through answers, that they maybe they've spoken about these things before, but just actually something that they actually there and then have to think about almost as they speak, and that is, if you get that, and I mean, in my journalism, I say it's happened very rarely, but when it does, it's incredibly engaging. And that's why people talking about their personal experiences often maybe something that's happened to them, and it's the first time in the north as a reporter you'd be sent to interview some people who witnessed an event or something or whatever, a violent incident, and so if you got to them first, you got this kind of torrent of they just want to tell you. It's like that. If you see something and you're the first time you speak about it is the moment where you're really are kind of formulating the thoughts as you speak, as you the words come out.
It's something that I'm conscious of, as I generally do send out emails to get our guests and stuff like that, and it is something I'm conscious of coming from an interviewer's perspective, that in the email I'm being as transparent as possible. I do usually state, look, if there's any topics that you don't feel comfortable with, we won't bring them up. Because who are we to kind of be the ones tripping people up? But we do get some good.
It's not. We're not going for it.
It is like what you said. It's finding the questions that will make the interviewee think on their feet, but in the best possible way, if you get me, and get an answer that hasn't. They've not even thought about them before. They haven't said before, basically an exclusive maybe or
two. We've done now. We have.
Yeah, we've. Oh yeah. One question I did want to ask was, so you started at Morning Ireland after the 6-1 news, and I just want to know what the transition was like. On a basic level, even it's a lot earlier. Your daily routine, 7 to 9. So
talk us through your daily routine now for Morning Ireland. What time do you rise at?
Well, the day starts the night before.
Okay.
So that's the kind of first thing to say about it, because there's, the program team are working on that morning's program the previous evening, and so the presenters come on with the program editor. There's two editors. There's the editor for the evening, and then the editor who comes in the morning. Okay. So and then there's a series editor, and we all take a phone call about quarter to 8 in the evening, and go through, spend 15 or 20 minutes going through the potential stories. I mean, it changes then obviously as the evening goes on, and sometimes you'll be assigned some interviews, so you might know we're going to be interviewing so and so, so you give a little bit of thought for that. I sometimes think maybe I prefer not to know who I'm going to be interviewing, because then I'm afraid I'm going to be lying in bed trying to sleep, but also thinking about what questions I should be asking somebody, and I need a night's sleep. But anyway, there's that kind of prep done from the night before, and then my alarm goes off at 4 a.m.
Oh.
Yeah.
That must be a tough one now.
Students, we're still at it that time.
I know, sure.
Paint a picture for me, why won't you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm driving to work at whatever time. I'm after 5. I'm leaving home, and I live in Portobello, so I go down near Harcourt Street and round by Coppers. They're still there. I mean,
have you ever been in Coppers?
Once, for Desi Cahal's book launch.
What? He had it in Coppers.
And there was me, Desi, and about 300 whatever number of people he had in, who were all probably more closer in age to me and Desi than to you guys. And I think for most of them it was the first time they'd been in Coppers as well.
That must have been some scene.
Would you be back, Brian?
No, I think I'll leave it to the young people.
Right.
You weren't getting up dancing to a bit of Westlife or anything like that, no.
Brian, if you were to have a drink now, what would be your tipple of choice?
I drink wine.
Wine?
And actually I'm in a wine club.
Oh, very nice.
So I mean, it's a sort of a thing. I have an interest in that, and so yeah, that's what.
Where did that come from? Like, wine is kind of an acquired.
Yeah, maybe it is. My father was in the wine trade.
Oh,
yeah, it was he worked for an importer and stuff. And not that I was sitting at home.
7-year-old Brian with a glass of wine.
Try this little Bordeaux, No. I don't know where it came from. I just I find I can't cope really with pints any longer.
Okay.
My metabolism doesn't work, and spirits I don't really dump that into them.
When you did have a pint now, what would it have been a pint of?
I used to drink a pint of Guinness.
Man after our own heart. Very good.
So one person that we mentioned there through the interview was your co-anchor for many years, Sharon.
Yeah.
You obviously had a great on-screen rapport and stuff like that. What do you think lended itself to that you got on so well and worked so well together?
I don't know. We just both got on. I think, although there's a lot of ego involved in the business, I think mostly in news, people tend to leave their ego, at the door or tone it down or whatever. And it's because of the pressures of news. Particularly, I haven't really worked in other areas, so I can't sort of comment. But I think in news, particularly because the demands just of getting the stories on air and getting the program on air are such that there isn't really a lot of room for people to start throwing hissy fits or anything. So I think we just get on because we focus on the job. Yeah.
Did you ever have I don't know, did RTÉ ever send you on a bonding session? Say, right, two you go get acquainted now.
No, I don't think so. Sharon came onto the programme after Uno Hagen left, and she had done quite a lot of presenting as well. So she came. She was very experienced, and she settled into it very well. And I think she kind of grew in the job as well. Over the years.
Did you have any bit of advice for her on her first day, or was she qualified enough that you said?
No. Well, I think so. I mean, certainly if you're working with somebody who hadn't done the show before, you'd advise them, as you say, look, this camera here, we'll have a 2-shot here. That kind of sort of nuts and bolts stuff.
Practical stuff.
Which is what people did when I started in Morning Ireland. People, were sort of telling me, this is the thing we do now. We do a time check here, and we have the weather.
So you've been away from radio for?
I used to do an occasional summer bit of relief on Morning Ireland, but I mean, I hadn't. And one of the editors said to me one time, coming in to do Morning Ireland in August, that doesn't count at all. Like you get up and the sun is shining. And, you got to be doing it in November and January and that kind of thing. So that's the real hardcore presenter. So I don't, but I done it just very occasionally. Yeah.
I have a question on that though. You always have a pen in your hand.
Do I?
Yeah, nearly always.
It's a little crutch, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. You never thought about it before? It's just. There.
I kind of sometimes I write things down, or somebody said something, or just make a little sort of note of it. Okay. Yeah.
I always wondered about that. You're not the only newscaster. Plenty.
I like to have I like to have I got my pen. I have these pens here, which are it's an ink pen.
Oh, it's what's called a fountain pen.
Fountain pen.
I don't like fountain pens.
So, and I like them because going back to my leaving cert, that my handwriting is pretty atrocious. But this keeps that bit neater.
Okay.
Because a ballpoint pen sort of runs away with you if you're a bit indisciplined as a writer. So I have, and the other thing, of course, is because it's a reasonably decent pen that, you know, is a bit more than $1.99. It's not that expensive, but then I'm less likely to lose it.
Yeah. Okay.
And just on the topic of advice, your successors, Katrina and Keelan, did you have any advice for them coming into the job?
No, I didn't. No. I mean,
didn't need it, I'd say.
Well, I know they didn't need it. No, I mean, if they asked me about, you know, something, I'm sure I shared whatever little tips I had, but no, they didn't. They don't need any advice. No, they're both extremely capable.
And Brian, when you're separated from the news and the work and the job, how do you actually relax? Do you watch movies, TV?
Yeah, I read
books.
Yeah,
Books. I know it's books.
Yeah, I'm not actually. I can say this now. I don't watch a lot of TV.
Okay.
And I tend to. If I do, you know, we might follow a series or something like that, or you know, that kind of thing. But I get free. I start watching something, you know, like a Netflix series or something, and then I forget about it, you know, and it's gone, and I kind of don't know. I've lost interest. So I read a lot. I read a bit of history.
I know we touched on wine. I also have down on my notes. You're a big fan of cheese as well.
They come hand in hand.
Yeah, I know they come hand in hand.
And the books, actually.
I'm not allowed to really eat cheese for health reasons.
Cholesterol.
And because my wife says that I snore ferociously. If I snore anyway, but apparently I snore out of this world if I have cheese. So I'm not allowed. If I do have cheese, I'm in the spare bed.
Okay.
So
sometimes you're like, any cheese in the fridge? Good night's sleep.
So that's it. That's what I do. And the other thing I do is in the summer months, and occasionally in the winter, I do a bit of sailing.
Oh, very good.
So and I got into
How did you get into that?
I just got into that. I know I always had a sort of thing about it. And my late father-in-law used to potter around in boats a bit, and he encouraged me a bit, and I got into it. And about it was a good few 20 years ago now, I got into it, and I did a bit of volunteer teaching of you know, sailing, that kind of stuff. So that's a great way to escape.
Yeah. You've also done a bit of charity work. I saw you did a bit of work with Samaritans there.
I do. Well, the Samaritans, I've done it occasionally. If somebody asks me to do something, I don't have a kind of ongoing thing with but occasionally I get asked, will I do something and you know, attend an event or something. So, you know,
I have one. I seen, this was a weird one. I had to go digging for this one. This was an RTÉ web chat from, I'm going to say, 2009, and I think it was you were actually replying to questions people
I remember that. Yeah.
And it was, someone asked you if, you know, why did you never move to the likes of Sky to advance your career, and you just replied, how would moving to Sky be advancing my career? Did it ever cross your mind? Did offers ever come in from across the pond or anything?
It did cross my mind.
Okay.
Yeah. I particularly early on, because I had worked. You know, I had worked in pirate radio, worked in a couple of pirate radios. I'd worked for 3 years at BBC. Then I was in RTÉ. So I was in this, you know, world where I'd moved every few years. Mm-hmm. So after my first few years in RTÉ, I was getting a bit restless, and I did, and I applied for. I applied for a job in London with Thames Television, which was a commercial station. Okay. I think they're gone now. And they had a business news program, and I applied for a job with them. And I was business correspondent at RTÉ at the time. Mm-hmm. And to my amazement, I not only got a reply, I got flown over to be interviewed.
Oh, wow.
And not only did I get flown over to be interviewed, but I had come back home through the front door that very evening. The phone rang, and it was them offering me a job. So this was all happening very quickly.
Yeah.
And my wife was standing in the hall, and I'm on the phone, and I put the phone down. I said, they've just offered me this job. And she was pregnant at the time, and she said, we're not going to London. We are not going to London. And I'll be in some flat in, you know, Camden Town or something, and you'll be off kind of flying, you know, being the, you know, big shot journalist. It's not going to happen. So I sheepishly rang them back and said, look, I'm sorry, I won't be taking that job, which I applied for, which I was interviewed for, which I was offered. I was always, they still reimbursed my flight, which I thought was very decent. So I was kind of, and I think maybe if my wife had been, you know, up for it, I think I probably would have gone.
Wow, maybe we wouldn't have seen you on the screens for so long.
And that's the question I have. I mean, obviously you've had a fantastic career so far, but has there been any regrets along the way? Opportunities not taken, maybe? Anything like that?
No, because it kind of worked out okay.
Yeah,
in the end,
fairness, you're not doing too
yeah,
badly for yourself.
I mean, yeah, I think. I'm not given to regrets generally in life about things. I mean, and I think I'm always ready to make a decision about something, and just you go with it. And okay, so that was my approach to this change from the TV onto the radio. Oh, let's just do it. I mean, it's a bit bonkers to volunteer for a job where you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but look, it's something different. It's new. It's a great show, and it's the most listened to radio program and all the rest of it. So I'm kind of inclined when I make a decision to stick with it. Yeah, I did on one occasion consider leaving RTÉ to go into the sort of private sector. I mean, completely out of journalism entirely, and I had got to the stage where I had more or less accepted the job, and I just had serious second thoughts. Okay. I decided no in the end,
And looking back now,
I'm glad.
Glad.
Yeah, that's something I have no regrets about. But I mean, the whole thing about life is every day or almost every day you come to a fork in the road, and we go this way rather than that way. And I don't know, at my age now, I look back and I think, well, what if I'd done that? That could have. But I don't kind of think, I missed out some wonderful experiences or opportunities or career or whatever. I mean, the thing too, I don't have regrets, but one of the things maybe it is a regret, is that I haven't kept in touch with more people over the years, and I haven't done enough. And maybe this is a guy thing to maintain friendships and connections. And there's people I meet occasionally, from school days. Met a guy last week. Hadn't seen him for 40 years, and I'm still thinking, now why didn't I stay in touch with someone like that? Because he's not that far away. He's still living in Dublin, and I sometimes. If that's a regret, that would be about the only regret I have. But then,
do you think that's like something though? Maybe you were so in the public sphere that maybe you were kind of isolating yourself a bit, like due to your work commitments. Did it maybe isolate you a bit? You were the face of the news.
I don't think so. I think people who know you and know you for who you are. So they're not. The fact that you happen to be on the TV. But the interesting thing about it is that if I come across people that I was in school with, who I mightn't immediately recognise, they immediately recognise me, and which is quite nice. But sometimes I have to sort of ask them to remind me, because obviously we've all changed a bit. Except they've watched me, slowly disintegrate.
Your hair is still that was something I've had on. Right, your hair is still impeccable.
Impeccable. When your own isn't too bad either.
Thanks, that's quite.
Stop flirting.
I was fishing for that one. No. Did it ever cross your mind over the years? You're like, shit, is my hairline going back a little bit? Did that ever come into, I don't know, did you ever have hair plugs? Just looking at you now.
No, I didn't.
we went from compliment to insult. That was a complete 180.
No,
sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Sorry, no, I've never had any. I've never had any cosmetic treatment at all.
Do you ever bit of Just for Men, keep it a bit darker?
No, it's all as it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all natural.
I did read in that web chat that we discussed before that you owe a lot to hairspray. And it pumped in. So, does it ever weigh in your conscience what you've actually done to the ozone layer?
To do what?
To the ozone layer.
Do you want a style section on the show every week?
No, and I actually have another one that actually feeds into my style section. Brian, you still wear a suit to work?
I do. At 5 o'clock in the morning. I know it's a bit strange.
You've said it's the uniform, but still.
Yeah, I know.
Could you not just even, shirt, slacks, maybe even just...
No,
do you wear a tie as well?
I wear a tie, yeah.
Oh.
Well, a tie, when you get to my stage in life, it's more, structural rather than... it kind of holds everything kind of into place. I've done that all my life, and going to work, it helps me at that hour of the morning, that I'm got the hour of the morning, to be focused on that I'm actually getting up to go to work. This is actually much, and it's easier, and the stuff is all, and I iron the shirt the night before, and I hang everything up ready to go, so I don't have to think about anything, and just off you go. And it is, but you're right, it is a uniform. Sorry, it is a uniform.
Yeah,
it's just a handy uniform to
would you just think, today wear a pair of tracks,
dress down Friday or whatever.
I don't see hoodie and tracksuit
Occasionally, when I was on the telly, sometimes I used to just do the upper part, and I mean, I'd have to wear trousers, obviously. But
Dave McCullough, the one in the shorts. He actually got quite a bit of backlash for that.
I remember that. But not only they were shorts, they're like cargo shorts.
Yeah. Oh, he did look ridiculous. Let's not beat around the bush.
So no, I once had a pair of jeans on, and the Polish president arrived in sort of unexpectedly for an interview. It had been arranged, but somebody hadn't told somebody. So this motorcade arrived one time for the 6 o'clock news with this Polish Irish president. It was when they were sort of campaigning to join the EU. And anyway, I did the interview with him. When it was over, he turned and said, I see you are a real newsreader. You wear the jeans on your
I do know from reading an article that your ideal dinner party would involve the most important women in your life, that namely your mother, your wife, your daughters, and Sharon. So it's safe to say that you're a bit of a family man. So has that always been a thing? Have you always been a very close-knit family?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to know. There are families who aren't close-knit, I suppose. I mean, now we're the girls are not, they're young women now, they're 20s, they've left home, so we're empty nesters now, which is a really
one of them, of course, as we were mentioned on the way, a DCU graduate. Hannah in marketing.
In marketing, yeah, she did a year in communications actually.
Oh really?
Yeah, her first
and then she
year.
decided to do a real course, was it?
Well, look,
she just
she
couldn't
decided,
hack the communication.
Such a strenuous work.
She decided it wasn't quite for her, so she took a switch. But she whatever about leaving communications, she would never have left DCU. I mean, she just was completely, a fan of the college and everything.
It's
yeah,
pretty good.
Still is. Yeah,
Brian did take a selfie on his way
He
here.
did. We should get a copy of that for ourselves. Brian, when Hannah was picking, and she was doing her CEO, and obviously she was putting down communications, did you have any input in the decision? Or
I was kind of surprised.
Really?
No, I had no input. No,
Okay.
entirely up to her. And it was the then head of the department or the course, whose name now is just suddenly I've had a blank. She was the senator. Anyway, who came into her school, her school, and Kriya went. There were one of these careers evenings, where they come in, and so the head of the school came in, and she gave this talk, and Kriya said, because Kriya was listening to the talk, said at the end of it, I was ready to join the communications because it was such a fantastic presentation, and so I think that was, and obviously Hannah was thinking, I don't know, no, I didn't, and I didn't either encourage or dissuade. Look, if that's what you've thought about, that's what you want to do.
And speaking of colleges, you were an adjunct professor at the University of Limerick.
Yes.
Are you still doing that gig now?
No, it was a 3-year
3 years.
thing.
So
I thought
year.
I'll do the 3 years and then I'll wrap it up. And they've I've been replaced actually by Fergal Keane of the BBC.
Oh,
yeah. So they've kept up the high standard, obviously.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. I enjoyed.
How did that come about?
It came about because one of the lecturers in the department asked me would I do it. A guy called Tom Fell, who is now head of the School of Journalism in NUIG in Galway, and he had since gone off to London and got his doctorate and whatever. So,
did he go before or after that whole thing with the journalism course?
He's come in the aftermath.
In the aftermath, okay.
So that's. I mean, he's a new broom, I guess. So he's going to deal with the aftermath.
So what exactly were you doing when you were doing that job?
I would go about twice a year,
right,
for 2 days,
and
I would do. I said when they asked me to do it, I said, I mean, I can't lecture as in the theory of communications or the future of online digital.
Hypodermic not needle model and all this kind of theories and stuff. Yeah.
No, I'm not doing. I said, look, I'll do practical stuff, script writing, interviewing techniques, writing for pictures, whatever, storytelling, news gathering. Then I'll do any of that. That's what we want to do.
And was it very interactive with students?
Yeah, which is the way I tried to do it. Like I actually tried to engage and get. So we have how do you think we might go about, sort of.
And what was the most surprising thing you learned from the young students about their knowledge of media or how they interacted with it, or even with yourself?
The most surprising was it? Well, I mean, one of the things I was asked to do to emphasise was the importance of reporters and the students who fulfilling that role of going out, talking to people, making phone calls, going to the source of the story,
being proactive. Because
I think one of the things that happens is because of social media, people go, I need to find out about
get your hands
the climate change, Google climate change, and whatever. So that was one of the things, and I think it's. I mean, that just wouldn't have arisen in my time because you couldn't. It was easier to phone somebody than to go off and try and do the research. So that was one of the things that I was asked to sort of mention from time to time. So I used to put that in as a little bit of advice. Yeah.
Any final questions, lads?
Let me think. We never touched on this. So obviously it really came to the public sphere when on your final show Sharon called you Dobbo. Now I've read since that you were like known as Dobbo through the halls of RTÉ and stuff, but now it is out there. have you seen an uptake in people saying, Dobbo?
Yeah, a bit, but people would call me Dobbo in the streets anyway, over a bit. And I've actually now started, signing emails to friends and Dobbo because it seems kind of easier.
I did enjoy when you signed one of your emails B. I just thought that. I would have
loved it way more if we got a Dobbo.
Yeah.
If we ever email you again, friend.
I'll send you a Dobbo for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Kira King actually leaves us X's all the time. Yeah. She was mortified when
we brought it up.
We brought it up in the interview, and she actually hadn't realised
that she sent us an X in an email. And
Colin was going around like a puppy for 2 days.
That's nice. Yeah. One of the girls are called is known as Dobby. It might be Hannah, I'm not sure, but anyway, so it's gone through a generational and a gender.
And a little twist on it as well.
Yeah. So,
I don't have any more questions.
I think Dobbo's a good way to end it.
Yeah,
I think it's a nice natural. Listen, Bryan or Dobbo, thanks a million for coming up today. It's been a great chat, and we hope you've enjoyed your experience.
Absolutely, thoroughly, and it's wonderful to come here to the new student centre.
We'll give you a bit of a spin around if you want before you leave.
There's your Waterford coming out and some spin around.
There's still a bit left.
Actually, I have one last thing. In the highlight little reel that RTÉ did after your final episode, Leash featured in it because you were at the Ploughing Championships in Rathneska. Yes, so there you go, Leash for Sam.
Yeah,
we can
end it there. Really going to end it there?
Yeah, of course we are. I can start a rendition of Lovely Leash if you'd prefer.
No, that's fine. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Bryan. This has been In Conversation with Bryan Dobson. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.